Hello everyone, and welcome back. Today in the workshop we have the smaller trident maple that I have in our series, and this tree did quite well the last 2 years. If you remember, originally we did a trunk chop and this became the leader. We let this grow freely for 2 growing seasons, and you can see now that it has a really nice transition from the old trunk to where the new growth is. Pretty convincing, and at the same time we've created some more movement in the tree. If you look in the rear here, there was a really severe cut that was done. It is healing over nicely. I mean, it's going to take a couple more, maybe 3 or 4 growing seasons for that to completely heal over and be completely finished. But it is well on its way. I did have to cut the height of the tree down to get it into the workshop here, which is fine because I anticipated doing that this year anyway. What we're going to do now is we're going to focus on figuring out a good top for the tree, or a good apex, and we're going to talk about possibly eliminating these 2 lower branches here, or one of the 2 lower branches. In my opinion, both of them are a little bit low on the tree for the final design, but then again, if I want to make a squat sumo type style tree, they're just about in the right place. They have their flaws just like everything else does in trees in training. But let's look at those 2 first. Now, I left these on intentionally after I did the main trunk chop, because one thing that you always want to think about is dieback. This is a maple species, and they do have a tendency, as you know, to die back to the next node, depending on when you chop them. Now, trident maples are not as adamant about that as Japanese maples are, but they do have a tendency to do that as well. I've had them do that on me. So I wanted to leave these 2 branches down here on, because number 1, they were already there and established. Number 2, it was somewhere that I could cut back to, in order to start the healing process to create the taper, as well as reduce the height of the initial tree. Now that they've pretty much served their purpose, I'm contemplating eliminating this one here for sure. It is at the very bottom where the wound is healing at. I do have some dormant buds down here, so even though I'm removing this, I may leave a stub, or I may just allow a dormant bud to pop and continue that growth, because when they get to this stage, they're not really helping energy to be put in to this area for wound healing. They're just kind of stagnant. These long leaders that grow really quickly are the ones that the energy gets prioritized to, because they're of course trying to be apically dominant on the tree. So I'm going to remove this one for sure. This one here is a little bit farther up and in a little bit different location. I've contemplated keeping it. In a way, I want to remove it also. It's potentially a little bit too low for where it belongs on the tree, but when you look at it in relation to this branch here, which this branch here is probably going to be kept, in relation to that, it's in a pretty neat location, because it'll cover the lower bottom portion and the rear portion of this tree, and it's in a nice transitional location to what this branch is here, and I believe we're going to keep this branch. If you notice, there really isn't a branch over here in this area. Again, that's what this long whip's for. I'm actually going to thread graft a branch probably somewhere here, probably somewhere right in this vicinity. So if we do end up keeping this lower branch, you've got a number 1, 2, and a 3. So those are the things that we're going to be looking at in going over today. Also, we got to figure out an apex for this tree. Part of me wants to cut back to this one here, this lowest branch, because at the tip it's viable. It will shoot straight up again and continue on with the thickening process and the healing of the wound. Part of me doesn't, because I've got a lot of time and effort in creating this trunk up through here, and ideally it should have been this one here, but I had to cut it because it was getting too dominant, and now it's not going to make a good apex, but it's in the right location. There is a dormant bud right here, so I am also contemplating removing this branch, removing the back branch and cutting it back to here to allow this dormant bud to sprout this spring. To me, that would probably be the best situation for this tree. But I'm going to have to start looking into that a little bit further. So let's go ahead and get started on doing the initial pruning. Also, I just wanted to mention to you on this tree as well, it's got the same situation going on here with the moss. Moss is great. It lets you know that you're doing the right things as far as growing. The soil is getting enough moisture. The downside to moss is, of course, it eats away at the bark. So, and it can become unsightly. It hides the nabari and it's eating away at the bark. The two tools that I use, I picked this up at a dollar store. It's just a dish brush, but the good thing about it is it's got the bristle portion. It's got polymer on the outside, and this is brass in the middle. And this does a really good job of removing stuff off of the moss and other things off of trees. So it's brass in the middle, and then it's got like a polymer plastic hard bristle on the outside. Another one that I use a lot just because it's nice to grab a hold to, and you can really get some good scrubbing action. It's just a softer bristled polyester or nylon, or I'm not sure exactly what the material is. They're both dish brushes. I think this one was 50 cents at the dollar store and this one was $1. I also use these same ones to clean my tools with after I'm done pruning a tree every time. To scrub my tools, I actually use a green Scotch-Brite with some WD-40 on it. The WD-40 acts as a lubricant, number one, and number two, a protectant. Number three, it'll actually remove tar, like from pine trees or sap that gets on your tools. It removes it almost instantaneously. So I guess we can start with the removal process of this moss. It's some stubborn stuff, so that's why I use this brass bristled brush first off, just to get in there and really get the bulk of it off the tree. You can see it makes quick work of the moss. And this should be done throughout the year. Of course, I didn't have time to, unfortunately, this year, so I'm paying for it now. Get the majority, and then whatever's left over on the trunk, I can come through with this and just scrub it off. Makes pretty quick work of the job. Stuff can be kind of stubborn, so it may take a little time for you to get all of it off. You'll have to work with it a little bit at a time. Down towards the bottom at the soil, it'll come off in sheets, which makes it easier to get away from the trunk. I just pull it back from the trunk in the nabari area and just replant it again, kind of farther away from the tree, because of course eventually, if these are ready for exhibition, you're going to want to moss them in anyway. And why waste good moss? We just want to keep it away from the nabari of the tree. We don't want to kill it altogether. We just want to keep it in control. So this process will take me a little time here. I'm not going to bore you with sitting here doing it in front of you the whole time, but I just kind of wanted to show you what I do to remove the moss. You'll get it every year, so every year this is something you're just going to have to do as general maintenance. But the brass bristles of this one particular brush do a really good job of getting rid of that moss quickly, and it doesn't damage the bark because it's still a softer bristle than what a steel wire would be. So that's why I use these two. So let me go ahead and continue cleaning this moss off. When I get it back off, we'll revisit the tree and we'll go from there. Okay, we're back. I don't know if you can see it very well in the video, but after cleaning all the moss off, it'll actually expose the nabari so you can see what you're dealing with and remember the direction on the tree. You know, before the moss was cleaned off, I was thinking that this was going to be the front of the tree, but I had totally forgotten that the widest point on the tree and the best nabari on the tree is actually right here in this general location. Looking at the tree, it's got a really nice muscled nabari. It's got some nice transitional movement, and I believe that this is the best front for this tree. Of course, we can always do whatever we need to here, but you can't hardly change a nabari. This branch is still going to be in an okay location. We've got to move it backwards. And it's going to change a little bit what we can do as far as the apex is concerned as well. Maybe twist it just a little bit more. Maybe right here, I'm thinking, is the apex for this or the front of this tree. So with that in mind, we'll go ahead and stick a reminder for us in here that that's where we want the front of the tree to be. And then we can go ahead and work the remainder of the tree off of that. So that kind of changes some things. We've still got to figure out what we're going to do for an apex on this tree. We've still got to figure out what we're going to do branch-wise. If we use this as the front of the tree, and pardon me, I've got it tilted so I can see it, not necessarily so you guys can see it, because you know, you'd be staring at the back of my head if not. I'm thinking to continue this transition, we could do something a little different. Bring that back over and above. So I'm thinking now that this will be the new leader on the tree. So facing you, facing you, what's going to happen is now the tree starts this way, comes back this way with the growing apex, and then this apex here that we're going to choose is going to bring it back this way. So it'll bring it back in balance, utilizing this as the new apex, with this as you see it as the front of the tree. This will be the new apex, and as you can see, it does the little, you know, this way. It goes from here to here, and then drastically this direction, and then the apex is going to bring it drastically back, and it'll kind of balance the tree again. The tree will be back in balance with itself. This back branch here can be completely eliminated. This side branch here is probably going to end up being eliminated as well. I'm not 100% sure just yet. I'm still contemplating now keeping it because it's actually in the right position for the tree, versus when we were looking at it like this as the potential front, this one was actually in the right position for the tree. So it just goes to show, you know, step one, make sure your nabari is exposed so you can remember where you have everything. When I planted it in this growing container, I wasn't really concerned with the front of the tree. I just wanted to get it in the container, get the root spread out and everything. Now that it's had a chance to mature a little bit, we've got the nabari. The nabari's actually thickened up considerably. And I did do some major cuts on the nabari when I first put it in here. And that was another thing I wasn't really concerned about, you know, exactly putting the tree in its exact position in relevance to where it's at in this growing container, because I needed to let certain areas have more extension growth than other areas to try to kind of, I guess, show the roots where I wanted them to go. Now I've got that. So really, to be realistic, the front of this tree is going to be here now, which means to be sitting in this growing container properly, if it was sitting in a bonsai pot, you'd want to rotate it about 45 degrees. And we will do that when we get to the repotting of this tree, when we get ready to move it from this growing container into a mica pre-bonsai pot, which the majority of my trees will be in until they go to exhibition, because I don't have a lot of money to spend on tokonoma and ceramic pottery for my trees. But they will be transitioning from these cheap plastic cement mixing tubs into mica, what I consider a pre-bonsai pot, because they will spend most of their time in those. And then when they're ready to go to exhibition, I'll remove them from those pots and put them into a ceramic tokonoma pot, or whatever, a glazed pot, whatever kind of ceramic type of pot I will put them in for show.